is Justin Brennan Beers, and this is my presentation on a sport-specific program design specifically for an amateur rower. To introduce my client, he's a 32-year-old young man who likes to enter friendly competitions with his friends, and he's already completed a Learn to Row course of 20 hours, which has given him some experience in a boat. So he's not completely new to the movement of rowing, which is good. Rowing is a sport that takes a lot of technique and a synergistic movement between the arms, the trunk, and the legs. Rowers have to be really strong to get the boat off the line really quickly, and they have to have stamina so that they can last during the entire race. But on top of that, they have to have good coordination, and they have to be really self-motivating. They have to have good teamwork if they're on a team. They have to be self-aware of their overtraining or their poor technique. And they also have to have the body type specifically for rowing. It helps to be tall and to have long levers. And rowing uses all three systems, the alactic, lactic, and aerobic systems. So it works a variety of thresholds and whatnot. So it's a really, really complicated sport to train for. So during the stroke, there's 5 different phases. The first phase is the catch, when the knees are flexed all the way and the arms are stretched out front. And it's important to try to keep a steady C in the back and not to lean too far forward, and to keep the back straight. And then the next is the drive, when the legs are extended and the back is kept behind the hips, so the shoulders are also behind the hips. And then once the legs are fully extended, it goes into the third phase, which is the draw. And the draw is when the arms are pulled to the chest. And then the finish is when the arms are lowered and the wrists are tilted slightly so that the blade flattens and comes out of the water. And the final stage is the recovery. And during the recovery, the torso will rotate over the hips. And once that has happened, then the knees can flex and the body can come forward again, absorbing the movement, but making sure that the back doesn't round too much, because that's when poor technique happens, and that's where a lot of injuries occur from overuse. So some time motion data, there is significant differences in flexibility in the iliopsoas, the tensor fasciae lata, and the hamstrings or quadriceps. And the aerobic fitness accounts for about 80% of the work during a 6 to 7 minute race, like the one he's training for the competition. The reverse linear periodization has been proven to be superior for training muscle endurance in comparison to linear periodization or undulant periodization, which are better for like strength and power gains. And in a study conducted where they reached out to 30 odd strength and conditioning coaches that trained rowing, and the majority of them said that they test muscular strength with the 1RM deadlift, squat, and bench pull, or the variety of other methods listed here, but those were the main ones. So the physiological tests that are done, the order that they're done would be non-fatigue, flexibility, vertical jump, agility, maximal power, maximal strength, sprint, local muscular endurance, anaerobic conditioning tests, and then aerobic tests finally. That way that you don't fatigue the athlete. They don't have to be all within a particular day, such as aerobic tests. If you have multiple, the muscles feel the fatigue immediately once the exercise is over, rather than maximal exercises, you feel it later during the day or possibly even the next day. So they could have to be spread out over multiple days. So the important ones to note, height, body weight, and arm span. Like I said before, it's important to be tall because that gives you longer levers. But if your arm span is greater than you are taller, that gives you even longer levers, so you can get a bigger stroke and a bigger power curve during your stroke. And if you're lighter, that means the boat will have less weight on it, creating less drag. So your muscles will be able to pull the boat across the water easier. The sit and reach is also important because assessing flexibility in a client is crucial so that you don't push them too far during exercises and avoid injury. So it's good to train it, and you can test it at the beginning and at the end to compare values to see if there's any improvement. Like I said before, the one arm squat, deadlift, and bench pull are important for maximal strength, and that's important for acceleration off the line and explosiveness during each drive is important. The 30-minute ergometer row, determining aerobic fitness like VO2 max is important because having a higher VO2 max, your body's going to use less oxygen, and if it's able to use less oxygen during the 6 or 7 minute race, that means it can train harder and you can pull harder during that. So the leg press at 50% RN is useful for training muscle endurance. Muscle endurance is important because not only does your cardiovascular system have to be able to handle that 2,000 meter race, but your muscles have to be able to push and keep that pace for the entire race, and that's what rowers work on the most. The modified Wingate test is to determine anaerobic fitness and power, so you can determine your anaerobic threshold via this. And also it's very useful for comparing values at the beginning of the training and at the end to see if you've made any improvements. Moving on to the injury analysis, there's the majority of the injuries happen, like low back pain, happen from overuse. The ribs also are particularly in danger because of the amount of rowing, the arm pulling during the motion that you're doing repetitively. If you're pulling too hard, you could fracture it. Other injuries include facet joint pain, sore hands. It's really common to get like blisters on your hands and stuff, and also calf bite. When you're moving on the boat, you can roll up and down and you can have the machine bite into the back of your calf and cause cuts that can take a long time to heal. So some intrinsic risk factors, so things you can't alter or change. So there's like bilateral asymmetry, so if one leg or one arm is longer than the other, then your muscles are going to adapt and there's nothing you can be able to do about it. Joint mobility, if you happen to have a past injury or something and you can't extend or flex a certain muscle to a certain point, then you're going to have issues during the movement. And the level of performance, most people, if they haven't done the exercise and they're really new to it, their body's going to have to learn the movements and create new neural pathways. But since John has already had Fred has already had 20 hours of experience, then he's already got a little bit of experience, so he's not completely new. Some extrinsic risk factors, so there's poor technique, getting fatigued and leaning forward is really common and causes a lot of problems like lower back pain, and that's when stuff really goes wrong and you cause injuries. And also overtraining, use of the muscles is just going to cause a lot of pain over time, and smart individuals know when to stop and assess the pain before it becomes a bigger problem. Injury prevention, it includes warm-up. You have to warm up, it's really important, and cool down 5 to 10 minutes, preferably 10 minutes after each session, so that your body returns to homeostasis. And treatment, that includes for your hands, whenever they get cuts and all that, you can have band-aids, and if those band-aids happen to be coming off because you're going out into the water often, you can buy like little mittens to keep them on. It might help the band-aids stay on, but it'll make the oar slip a little bit more, but you're going to have to decide, is it more important to prevent more injury, which it is, than to have more trouble holding onto the oar. And also for your calves, if you get cuts on the calves, not only can you put a band-aid, but you can cut like a piece of fabric, like a sock, and pull it up over the calf and cover the band-aid, because then that'll keep that band-aid on. And also you should have antibiotic cream on you at all times, so that you can treat the cuts so that they don't get infected. You could also get ultrasounds or such if you end up having some joint problems, or if you want to go into a doctor if it's that serious. Sorry about that. So some warm-up stretches you can do. To start off, there's just the lumbar stretch, which is when you just lay on the ground and stretch out like this. The cat-cow, where you focus on lumbar flexion and then flattening or extension on the cat. There's the bird dog wave, where you get up on the same side, leg and hand, and then you bend to the side that the hand and leg are on the ground laterally, and then return straight. There's chest sweeps, where you reach your arm across under the ground and then bring it all the way up to have abdominal rotation. And then we have the lateral lunge with hip opening, where you can have your arms above the head and then laterally flex to activate the core, such as this. Then we have the hamstring stretch, where you simply lie on your back and pull your leg up at your knee. And if you want to release some of the stress on your lower back, you can just bend your bottom leg a little bit. And then we have the airplane walk, where you just stand on one leg with your arms outstretched to your side and bend at the hips forward until parallel with the ground. And those are just some examples of warm-up stretches you can do. So some strengths that our client has: Fred is, like I mentioned, tall. So he will have longer levers than the average person, but not only that, his arm span is longer than he is tall. So he's going to have a bigger stroke than the average person as well. And his bench press, which is an antagonist muscle to the bench pull, is above average. So that proves that he has the upper body strength to handle the stress of the motion. And his VO2 max is above average for the people in his club. So that's good, because it means his cardiovascular system is up to par, using little oxygen during the race, and meaning he can properly pull harder for longer. Some of his weaknesses, though, that he's going to have to work on, his skin folds are larger than his peers, and that means that his body composition isn't good. So he's got some more fat than muscle, that if he works on that, he's going to have less weight on the boat, meaning he's going to have less drag, and his muscles aren't going to have to work as hard to pull himself across the water. The barbell back squat, so the lower back and the legs have to work together during the row, and if he doesn't have all that strength, he's not going to be able to produce enough power per stroke. The vertical jump is also lacking, and it's important because explosive power during the beginning of each stroke reduces the amount of work that your muscles are going to have to do successively after. So if you can have good explosive power, then you'll also have good acceleration off the start. And the hand grip, if his hands are not transferring the energy efficiently from the stroke, then he's going to be losing power and losing speed, and his hands are going to be developing more stress due to that as well, which can cause injury, like mentioned. So his training priorities: to start off, his VO2 max is going to be his priority, because aerobic fitness is 80% of the sport. So Boosting his VO2 max is going to be able to make him use less oxygen, and that way he's going to get lower times. Muscle endurance has a direct correlation with how fast the boat is going to go. If your muscles can produce force and keep the pace for the full race, then that boat is going to go faster and you're going to get, again, a lower time. And then maximal strength to increase acceleration off the start. Getting the boat up to speed is important so that you can get your muscles acclimated, and then your body can just keep that pace for the rest of the race. So the competitive program design that I've chosen is for the 20 weeks leading up to this 2,000 meter competition is a competitive design which mixes linear and non-linear periodization. So it starts off with a general preparation, and then a specific preparation, a pre-competition, and then the main competition, which is the maintenance phase. And then it goes into transition, but that's afterwards once the competition is over, so we're not going to worry too much about that. So the strength is going to go through the non-linear periodization. So we're going to start off with the high intensity, high load, low volume. That way we're going to develop maximal strength. So after a quarter of his training, he's going to turn and do higher reps, lower the load, so that he can turn that maximal strength into endurance. And then to go into the next phase, his third quarter of his training is going to be more, again, higher reps, so that he can work mostly into the endurance. And then the maintenance phase is going to be corrective training and working on technique, avoiding overtraining and trying to prevent injury, so that when he goes into his tapering, the final week, he's going to be completely rested. He's going to keep the frequency low and the volume low, so that when he goes into competition, he's going to have as much potential as possible to succeed. For the endurance part of his program design is going to be a linear periodization. So he's going to start off with basic endurance or aerobic workouts, such as like long 30-minute rowing with minimal rest, just low intensity. He's going to move into doing intervals to train anaerobic threshold, and such as 3 times 20 minutes of rowing with 10 minutes or 15 minutes of rest. And then he's going to go into increasing the time and the distance during the intervals. So an example of that is doing the 500 meters with a minute rest, doubling the distance to 1,000 with a 2-minute rest, and then again to 1,500 with a 3-minute rest, and then going back down to 1,000, and then the 500, and then the 250. But as you keep your race pace during the first 3, you want to increase the pace for the last 3, even though you're dropping the distance but not burning out. So flexibility, like I mentioned, warm-ups, cool-downs are all extremely important. They should be done before and after each session. And on days off, you should work on flexibility by doing things such as yoga, but nothing more, just going on a walk, because rest days are meant to rest. And again, just like the endurance side as well, also does tapering on the final week, just lower volume, lower frequency, so that the muscles recover properly. I'm just going to have my client come in so that we can do the demonstration of the exercises. Debbie, yeah. Could you come here, please? So for maximum power, The 1 RM deadlift is really important because the catch phase of the rowing is mimicked perfectly by the deadlift because this position is almost identical, and you can analyze mobility limitations during that because sometimes rowers don't have strong glutes because relative to their hamstrings or their quads, so this works on those weaknesses, and it's also important to have those large reserves of strength to drive the force during stroke. And if there's no increase in weight on the boat and there's an increase in strength, then the drag remains the same, so then you're going to have an easier time pulling your weight across the water. So to start the deadlift, you're going to just position the bar close to your shins with your feet shoulder width apart. You're going to bend down, put your hands just past shoulder width apart. You're going to keep your head up and your chest up. And as you extend your knees and your hips, you're going to pull your shoulders back and thrust your glutes forward. And then as you come down, you're going to keep the bar close to your shins and your back flat. And drop it straight. Okay, so put your feet shoulder width apart. Flex your knees and your hips down while keeping your head up, and grasp the bar just past your shoulders. Roll the bar close to your shins if you can. Keep your back straight and extend and thrust forward. Don't thrust too far back.
Oh.
Yeah. Now keep the bar close to your shins and your back straight and your chest up, and drop it to the ground. Good. Following that, for the anaerobic section, the squat. In that study that I introduced earlier, those strength and conditioning coaches ranked the squat second, just under the clean, as a ranking of importance for training. The front squat induces more quads and is easier for taller people so that they can get into full depth. But the back squat recruits more hamstrings and glutes. So with the back squat, you're just going to position the bar at the top of your traps as a high bar position, and you're going to keep your chest up again and your back extended flat and looking straight, feet shoulder width apart. Bring your knees over your toes and your feet straight, and flex your hips and your knees until your thighs become parallel with the ground, and then extend the hips and the knees straight while keeping the chest up. You can grab it yourself. So put your hands just, one and a half times shoulder width apart, feet shoulder width apart. Good. Keep your back straight. Bend your knees and your hips. Bring the knees over your feet. Keep going till you're parallel. Stop. And now come back up, keeping your chest up. Perfect.
Thank you.
I got it.
Good, thank you.
And finally, we have the tuck jumps for the speed, because rowing is a sport where you're sitting down. There isn't any speed, agility, or quickness activities you can do. So the speed is used more in like starting power off the drive. As noted here in the middle, is more for power than pure speed. So progressive overload can be used with this tuck jumps or box jumps just by increasing the height of the box or by reducing the rest time. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you're not under the fan, and squat down again and push up as high as possible. But when you push up, you're going to want to tuck and catch yourself.
Okey-dokey.
I just didn't want to jump and hit myself in the head.
I don't think I'll hit the ceiling. Okay.
No, I'm just way taller. I didn't. You
I-
won't. I just know
Okay.
I probably will. So
Hands are where?
you can hands in front of you.
Okay.
You can just
So I can use my arms?
try. No, try just
Not to?
just
Okay.
legs. Yeah.
So I'm gonna squat down,
Yeah.
full.
Yeah. And power out and jump up and then tuck your legs at the top of the. So
Yeah.
as you extend
Yeah.
and jump up, you're gonna then tuck your legs
Oh.
up to your chest in the air, and then you're gonna drop them and catch yourself.
Okay.
So like.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Ouch.
You give it one more try.
Yeah. I have no vertical.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. That's everything. Just those three.
Okay. I could have practiced that one.
And so for the aerobic section that we're not going to demonstrate for the purpose of this video, ergometer training or just rowing on the water, 3 by 100,000 meters with a work to rest ratio of 1:1, so meaning that your work and your rest are the same time, is good. So to conclude, rowing is a really difficult sport, and it takes a lot of training of a bunch of different aspects that have to work all together to get success. Preventing injury is the most important. Like I said, overuse is the majority of the injuries that happen, and if you can notice them, a good athlete can assess that and prevent it from getting any worse. And like mentioned in the book, for activities or athletes that involve a lot of different movements, a mix of nonlinear and linear periodization is optimal for enhancement. So if Fred focuses on his aerobic fitness, he's going to be able to have better oxygen consumption during the race. His cardiovascular system is going to be able to handle it longer. And I think he's going to be able to finish higher than his friends. His muscle endurance, if they can last the race, that's also really going to set the pace for how fast he can go for the amount of time that he's on the water. And maximal power, again, to get off the line is going to be important for acceleration, especially if he starts getting fatigued and he has a burst of energy or corrects it, he's going to need that power. Having friends to compete, I think, is going to be really good for him because it's going to give him the more motivation than just wanting to win a competition. I think wanting to beat a friend or anyone is more motivation if you're really passionate about something. And that's going to conclude my presentation on the sport-specific program design for amateur rowing. This is my reference list, and thank you for listening.